The issue is simple. We are spending more than we are taking in. Much more. Now, many on the right argue that spending is the biggest problem, while many on the left say, well, not enough revenue is really the issue because taxes as a percentage of income are at their lowest level in about 60 years. So let us do what we do on the show and discuss and maybe debate a little bit. Joining us now, Michael Linden, Director for Tax and Budget Policy at the Center for American Progress, and Grover Norquist, President of Americans for Tax Reform. Our very own Rick Santelli will also join us. Grover, let us begin with you. I understand your point. You don't want any taxes raised, but even a Gallup poll says that many in America do support slightly higher taxes in addition to spending cuts. How do you respond?
Well, a majority of the members of the House of Representatives and 41 senators were all elected promising not to raise taxes. So that's a little bit more important than a poll. People have made that commitment not to raise taxes. And here's the challenge we have. Obama has taken spending, which when he took office was $2.9 trillion a year, up to $3.8 trillion a year. So it's $1 trillion more each year than it used to be. The problem is the jump in spending. We don't need to raise taxes to pay for Obama's oversized government. We need to claw back the amount of spending that Obama, Reid, and Pelosi committed the country to that the country never agreed to.
Aren't there also, Michael, a whole pile of tax loopholes and special subsidies and spending programs out there? If we just closed some of those up, we would be able to raise a lot more money without actually having to raise taxes.
That's exactly right. The tax code is littered with special subsidies, loopholes, and spending programs that Grover calls tax cuts. But they're not tax cuts. They're spending programs. They're just designed as tax cuts, and they're disguised as tax cuts. And if we got rid of those, we could raise a ton of money. We could close a lot of this deficit without having to raise a single rate, without having to cut Medicare down to the bone or Social Security down to the bone. The problem is that Grover is against any form of tax increase, even if the program is terrible, doesn't work, inefficient, or completely wasteful. He still says you can't cut it because it's a tax cut. And that's just foolish.
Actually, I'm sitting here, so it's probably nice not to misstate my position. The Taxpayer Protection Pledge that most of the Republicans, most of the members of the House of Representatives have signed, and 41 senators, including Senator Ben Nelson, Democrat from Nebraska, is that you can get rid of any deduction or credit that you want to as long as you reduce rates so that it's revenue neutral. It defends no tax credit.
Imagine if Democrats were running, hold on a second, Grover. Imagine if Democrats were running around saying, we are not going to cut a single program, even if it's wasteful or terrible, unless you increase spending someplace else. They would be laughed out of the room, and rightfully so.
So Michael, let's lay it out here. 1980, the median net effective federal tax rate on an income household in America has dropped by half since 1990. In other words, the middle-class tax burden has actually gone down considerably over the last 30 years. You don't hear that much, but it's true. So is the middle class under-taxed?
Well, I think we should focus first on where the money is, and that's at the top. And the effective tax rate for the top 400 taxpayers has gone down dramatically.
Yeah, but you know you can't make a dent, Michael. You know better than I do. You can't make a dent in any deficit with just those 400 people, right?
Actually, no.
And the reality is that 80% of the people who make over $250,000 a year also make less than 500. They're the working wealthy. They're not Bill Gates.
So you're right. You're right that you can't make it down with just those 400 people. But if we're going to ask people to pay a little bit more in taxes, I think we should start with those 400. And I also look. And here's the big difference. I'm saying we are going to need to have some spending cuts. We're going to need to have some revenue increases. We need a balanced approach. In fact, that's what the American people are saying. You mentioned that poll. 80% of Americans think it should have some revenue, some spending. Grover's position is incredibly extreme and outside the mainstream. No revenue at all, no matter what, under no circumstances, no matter if it's a natural disaster or a huge deficit, you still can't have revenue. That's way outside the mainstream.
I would really like to
Let's take a look, guys. Could we take a look at what the problem is? We've increased spending. I didn't have anything to do with it. Obama, Reid, and Pelosi in the last 2 years increased government spending $1 trillion each year. We're spending $1 trillion more over a year than we did 3 years ago, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
fixing the overspending problem, Please don't talk over me. Fixing the overspending problem brought to you by the Democrats is not helped by raising taxes. They tripled the number of troops and the expenses in Afghanistan. That's a lot of additional money and other things that this administration's been spending on. They threw $800 billion at the stimulus package and killed 1.5 million jobs. Killed 1.5 million jobs.
I'd really know what Rick Santelli has been unusually quiet during all of this. What do you have to think about it, Rick?
Well, Mr. Linden, my question to him would be, does he realize that all these horrible little loopholes that we've carved out, that really is the tax code? And I can't stress that enough. The 535 guys that are supposed to, and women that are supposed to represent citizens, they created the tax code. The people didn't create it, okay? It was created by our government, and they need to address it. But it also isn't the panacea for our other guests, because as Carly Fiorina said today on our show, there are many very large corporations on the corporate tax side, not to switch gears, that don't pay anywhere near 34.9%. Another pot of gold that's being disingenuously put forth to the American public. Here's my motto, TUI. Don't allow taxing while under the influence of profligate spending. Period. End of story.
Grover, I want to go to you because Ari Fleischer, formerly of the White House, wrote an excellent op-ed last year basically saying that with 49% of a country effectively paying no net federal income tax post-deduction, it's not bad for the economy, but it's also bad for democracy because everybody should contribute. Should we have some sort of a minimum? I mean, you have, 20, 30, 40% of the population paying effectively zero to the government. Is that healthy? Is that good?
Well, one thing to keep in mind is those people are paying sales taxes and property taxes and state income taxes. So they're not
to the
paying
states,
nothing.
and I understand payroll taxes as well, Grover, but that is for a specific program.
Right. The present income tax is, quote unquote, very graduated or progressive. It's heavily weighted against employers, against higher income folks in terms of what they're paying. Of course, Obama's position is that he says he won't raise taxes except on people who earn more than $250,000 a year. But 16 days into his presidency, the first tax increase he signed was on cigarette smokers. And the only person in America who smokes cigarettes and earns more than $250,000 a year is named Barack Obama. That his first hit was on low and middle income people, and he keeps hitting them. That's why he won't give you the list of tax credits he wants to get rid of, because so many of them would hit the average Americans, and he don't want to show you that list.
Okay, to Michael, Linden and Grover Norquist, and of course our very own Rick Santelli, thanks for a great debate.